So today I'm going to be talking to you about Iki. Iki is a very interesting concept behind this game with a very intriguing incorporation into the mechanics and the actual tie-in from the meaning into the game. If you're not familiar with what Iki is, back in Japan in the Edo period, there were restrictions and edicts put down on the lower class in order to separate or to keep the class differentiation from the wealthy, the well-to-do, the top of the classes, and lower. In terms of not allowing them to buy certain things, not allowing them to basically accumulate any certain amount of wealth, and if they did, to lose it potentially. Especially under the thought that they were looking like they were more out of their social aspect. And so then this led to the development of the rough translation of Iki being chic, meaning they found ways to sort of rebel, to skirt the law without making it too obvious. Subtle things that may not be immediately noticed or more nuanced than what you may expect instead of the gaudy display of wealth from the upper class. A plain kimono, on the outside by a lower class merchant or commoner, but a show of wealth on the inside alone with a silk lined layer against the body. Things like that to outwardly appear one way and to inwardly display something unique, different, and slightly against the rules. And so this game takes that concept and it transforms it into a roundel-based worker placement resource management game that is very intriguing. Let me show you, two-turn review, pros, cons, things you may like, things you may not like, and my final thoughts. Let's talk. So what I have here is just the basic board setup in terms of the beginning of the game with a player board set in the middle so you can see the different actions and the different characters you're going to be utilizing. Part of the setup, you each get a unique worker that you're going to be utilizing and having the ability to control and to get other bonuses along with them. They're asymmetric at the beginning there, and you each get one of them. You are playing this game over a series of 13 rounds, 12 of the months of the year, and then a special New Year round at the end, and you are keeping track via score down here. And I have this board oriented for very good reasons because the top of the board and the middle of the board are much more important. The bottom part down here, you're keeping track of fire, and you're keeping track of the worker placement location as well as the score. But that's lesser because a lot of it is really going on in this area in particular. First thing that you really need to know is this character. This is your main initiative marker. And what you're doing is you're going over here and you are selecting one of these four spots. 1 to 4, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now the 1 to 4 comes with a special condition that you don't get to do the second phase of the game. But that's important because this gives you the ultimate control of how many spaces you want your main worker to move in the first place between the four various big stalls. These are your individual workers that you're going to be placing on the merchants in the stalls and upgrading, and how you keep control and which ones are yours and which ones are going to be held by other people. That is the general overview of what you're going to see in this game. Now the board itself comes with many other pieces. It runs you through here. If example, if we move my workers here, you can see this. Well, then after you place your main person in terms of how many spaces this one's going to be moving, you then either get 4 income, or you can buy one of the various merchant cards that has come up that round for the price in the upper left-hand corner. Then you get to choose where you want to place it in any open stall of your choosing and claim it as your own. And when you claim it as your own, you're putting your worker there. Then what happens is if people come to these stalls, as you are taking your turn, this guy will be moving around the outside between these stalls, and wherever that one ends up, you utilize not only the stalls action itself here, but you'll be able to actually interact with one of the merchants there as well if you so choose. And that's the next phase of things. Then rinse and repeat. You would take your character, which was maybe here, back to your board, and then end of round situations, which are going to vary depending on the time of the year. And that will also change because you'll notice that these workers or these merchants here are also varied by season. And so you're only going to be putting out certain ones in certain seasons in that way as well. So some variability there. The other aspect that goes along with that, the other thing that you can be buying with the resources is buildings. Buildings that will cost you various resources from rice to money to wood that are basically only a one-time buy and that are going to give you either variable win conditions in terms of extra bonus points or victory points at the end, or just straight up victory points here, like in this case, 22. But you'll notice that they all have workers on them. So you are permanently assigning one of your workers to one of these buildings. So timing becomes very important because, as I already showed you, you only have 4 of these total. Now, what's the other aspect of these merchants if we pull these back here? As your characters go around, you'll notice this symbol right here. This symbol means all of your particular merchants get upgraded. And so then your workers will make their way up these cards, and as they're sitting on these cards, that will dictate the most important phase of these rounds, the income phase at the end of the seasons. And at the end of the seasons, you'll get whatever is the next highest level. So if my worker, for example, is here, I get the highest. But what happens is after they graduate from this level, this card is taken off the board. But what happens here is the very, very important thing both for scoring as well as strategy. This becomes part of your income forever. So forever, on every income phase, you're now going to get this. And then those workers are coming back to your board to be able to get more in the first place. Now, the tricky part is for every worker you have out here, you have to also have enough rice to feed them at the end of every season as well. So the balance comes from that aspect of things. Now, there are obviously some other nuances. You have the sandals tiles that you can acquire as bonuses that allow your main character to move one space further for each one. And then you also have the other dynamic down here that I didn't mention, the fire. So at the end of several different seasons, as you'll see up here, you can see that there are 3 times throughout the game that fire occurs. What happens is you draw one of the tiles that corresponds to the various merchant areas. What then occurs is you'll notice these symbols that are present at the top, and you work your way from outside to inside, and any merchants that are there get consumed by the fire and are immediately lost from income purposes as well as for endgame scoring conditions. However, if you get various bonuses like this merchant stall here, you'll notice a lot of these are converting one resource to another, converting one resource to another, the ability to buy tokens, which we'll talk about in a second. But this one over here in particular is fire. And so this one gives you a point on the fire track, and you can block the fire. If the fire track that is played for that round, if you have a higher value than the value of it for that round, you block the fire. As the fire goes across, you'll also notice that the fire gets weaker. So if you are all the way over here, it may be significantly weaker and you may be able to block it. But it also can consume the whole thing and it can affect everyone. So it behooves you to pay attention to that unless you feel like you can risk it and the 25% chance that it doesn't hit a stall that you want every single time that happens. Now, the last aspect of things I have not touched on in this game, and this is another variable set collection-esque scoring condition, is you'll notice that I have markers both here on my board for several things, as well as markers here and here. Pipe, tobacco, fish market. And so when you land at this stall or this stall, there will be tokens that are very seasonal specific for victory points or set collection victory points, depending on how you get them or which ones you get in which seasons. And those can be bought for specific currency as well at those times. That is the gist of the game. And you go, like I said, until all 13 rounds are played. Now, the last 13th round is slightly different. The rest of the rounds, you're putting this one over here and deciding. The last round, it just says, you know what? Put your guy anywhere, take one last set of actions, and you're done. That's it. And so that's another nice thing, because isn't there always a game or a gamer in your group that says, oh, if I just had one turn, if I just had one more chance to do it? Well, this game says right here, there you go. No more excuses. Put them where you want, get it, and let me see what you got. That is the general gist overview of Iki. Let me tell you my final thoughts. I love the concept of Iki so much so that in order to even do this video, I researched it to be able to talk to you about it more informatively. This ideal of a mundane appearance in the context and the effort to achieve that result not being the same as what it actually looks like. Encompassing sort of ideals of, quote, spontaneity and originality while trying to appear just sort of carefree, right? Even though it may have been very involved to actually make it look that way. And that is the basis of this game. This is a very humble appearing game. But as you saw, the ways in which this manipulation on the board can be handled are anything but rote. And that's why people have liked it, is because the outward appearance and the inward gameplay are a nice, pleasing contrast in their execution. I will say that most of my play has been at the 2-player count, but the use of the blocking system makes it a tighter experience, whatever that means. But it allows you to have a game that is well at a lower player count with the use of these mechanisms than you otherwise may have in other situations. I am self-proclaimed not a huge worker placement fan. At the same time, when I play something that I can see the nuances, I can see the gears turning and the wheels clicking in terms of the design ingenuity, I can appreciate it regardless. So to see how all of these systems sort of mesh and you can manipulate is nice. You will like this game if you're looking for a worker placement game that now plays well at 2, 3, and 4. You will not like this game, as I mentioned, if you do not like the aspect of the fire potentially taking out some of your stalls and your workers in the first place. I also felt like with my limited play at the lower player counts, getting enough of those workers out there to take advantage of significant benefits that they may offer, whether hiring them or utilizing other people's, is a weakness of it. At the higher player counts, more workers, more accessibility, more variation of what you're going to be able to do. Your pathways are somewhat more limited at the 2-player count, even with the adding of the additional workers, because of their one-time use nature. But what the nice part is though, as complicated as this rondel can be in terms of taking a worker as well as a booth action, your limitations of how many spaces you can move are things that make the turns actually a lot quicker than I was expecting, which is a good thing for a game like this that I was worried about when I read through the rulebook, that this was going to be a lot more complicated, a lot more overhead, a lot more analysis strategic than I necessarily am good at, or that I look for in a game like this in the first place. I think the last round New Year's bonus, essentially, is also an interesting twist on things to give everybody one last shot, because at the end of these games, inevitably, right, we just had this happen the other night when we were playing Hansa Teutonica. I said, if I would have had one more turn, I could have done this, I could have done this, and I would have had like 14 more points and I probably would have won, right? We've all had those games and those turns and those scenarios. And it gives you that example, and it allows you to do that to prove your point or to prove you wrong, right? In just one more turn. Here you go. Here you go, folks. Here's enough rope to see what you can do with it. You're going to swing and hit for the fences, or you're going to give yourself just enough rope to hang yourself in terms of saying, I should have won if I would have done this. Well, you got one more chance. Let's do it. Let's see if we can do it. And that's refreshing in a way. You have to plan for it initially too, but it also gives you something to scramble for. One other thing that I'll just mention, I thought there would be a little bit of scaling in some of the workers as the seasons went on. And there wasn't as much scaling from the power aspect But there was more scaling when it came to, I thought, the salaries that you gained on the income phase. Strength-wise, strategy-wise, I'm not sure if there is a right or wrong way to go from those aspects, not having played it enough, though. But just something that crossed my mind as well. All in all, though, I liked it a lot more than I was expecting. I can't tell you whether or not it's going to stay in my collection at this point. Just because, like I said, I'm not a huge worker placement fan, but I know now why people like it for what it is. But like I said, how does that fit with you? And that's why it's worth talking about from both aspects, especially as someone who is not heavily into this. I don't want to say an outsider. How does an outsider feel about a game like this? So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully this was enjoyable, and let me know if you have any thoughts on the game or questions or concerns. This was supplied to me by the company, Hatchet Games, and so thank you for sending it so I could talk about it. Stay classy. Have a great day. See you around.